you have to submit to budget, then that would give you pretty much a full week to, well, if we could get the questions, say, by Wednesday, the 17th, on the 22nd, we could have the same meeting for any changes that would be suggested at that point. And I would say that we perhaps do it that day of the council meeting. Would that be acceptable?
So, Mayor, do you want that in the form of a recommendation? So I would like to recommend an amendment to give council up to the 17th for additional conversations for us to review at our May 22nd meeting prior to our budget fiscal 24 meeting on May 25th.
Right, so the 17th, I guess I want to make sure that, again, if the issue is how quickly you can get the response, to make sure that the budget office, if we got it on the 17th, if they were due by the 17th, could we get a response over the weekend, I guess by the 19th? So if there are questions submitted by council members on the 17th, could we send it out? Well, what if we do the 16th, and that way it can go out with the packet?
Okay, so we're shortening the time, and I think somewhere in my question, it kind of got lost. We're going to be making recommendations. All I was asking is if we can have additional time for the recommendations, because staff has already given us answers. Now, they've given me some additional questions. I would like to have the space to ask those questions today. But as far as my recommendation, if we have additional recommendations outside of what is identified today with 5 colleagues, do we have the space to submit those additional recommendations prior to the May 25th decision?
And that's what I was saying. I thought that we could, if you could tell those considerations by the 16th for your questions, as well as the analysis for them, that would mean that you would have the cost, the consequences, the timeline on the 25th if we got it to you by the 6th. If you submitted it on the 16th and the staff could get it done by the 20 or 21 or 22, I guess it would have to be the 22nd meeting that you'd have additional time to discuss it, and then we would have it ready. That would be the 2 dates that we would have. So here we are. If we could, I'm sorry, let me just make sure, Ms. Mayfield, what you're suggesting is that you submit additional questions, and by the 22nd, you can submit changes as well as get the responses to your question.
Yes, and I will acquiesce for the 16th in order to give time enough. That gives us about additional 5 days. That will give enough time for staff. So if the 16th will work better than the 17th, then I support that, Mayor.
I think it would give you more time for council to get the information so that you can have it by the 22nd. And then on the 25th, on the 22nd, we'd find out if there are additional changes approved by the council members. Mr. Jones.
Okay, so the questions that we received, for the most part, it was Monday, and a lot of, did I get that right? This Monday? Right. And so a lot of work went in to make these thorough, to talk to departments and what have you. So the only thing I would ask is, I think if we get questions on the 17th, we're going to be in the same situation, that we're going to, talk to the team and try to get the right answers. And I think if I give you something on the 19th or on that Saturday, we may be in the same position that you don't have enough time. So I guess what I'm asking is if we could kind of reverse engineer it and figure out as much of the questions that you may have this week so that we can have a little bit of time to work on them, I think to give you more time to review the responses.
So, Mr. Manager, I agree. I'm just asking for more time for us to submit our recommendations.
So what would you think about the 15th or earlier, or the Friday? We could do it tomorrow. You could just submit your questions tomorrow.
Okay.
Does that be okay with?
No, this packet, and I didn't mean for this to take up this much time. It was just simply a question of, can we have additional time if we have additional recommendations other than the recommendations that came out today? Because in here, I'm just looking at one page with these numbers that are presented to me. I have a challenge with when we're having this conversation. So I don't necessarily have all the recommendations for today based on what was responded to, but I might be able to pull my recommendations, and maybe my colleagues might be able to have additional recommendations. They might be ready. I'm not with getting this and actually going through it and looking at it. So I was just asking, can we just have more time for the recommendations? Not really more questions. We're gonna ask the questions in here, but just to get our recommendations in before the 25th. Manager, does that make sense?
Yeah, so if I understand, it seems like it's a twofold process, that if there are some recommendations that you're not prepared to make today, whether it's next Monday or next Wednesday, you just don't want today to be the end.
Yes. Right,
Okay.
and I'm just trying to pick a date, and I would say, could we do it have everything in order by the 22nd, so the 25th is an actual decision-making meeting. So, but I think the concern that we should have is how much time does it take staff to actually do? And as you said, 5 days, so let's just run it backwards. If we're going to have something on the 22nd, on the 15th, you would have to have any changes vetted on the 15th. Or in for vetting. Sorry, yes.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we'll get more questions today, which is probably the lion's share of the ones that we'll be working on for this next packet. And then if we can get whatever else is a question by early next week, we should be able to produce something by Friday or Saturday so that council would have time on Sunday into Monday. If you wanted to turn Monday into the only the 5 votes go on to Thursday type thing, and then Thursday settle the budget, I think that works from the budget staff. My only caution or concern, I should say, would be that we're basically going to start analyzing stuff right away, but if there's brand-new things on Monday, the 21st, it's going to be tough for us to turn those around. So I don't, that's not what Ms. Mayfield's saying, but getting stuff by early next week and turning around by Friday and Saturday, questions should be fine.
Right, and then any changes, I think, would be on the 22nd, and that would give you just 2 days.
Right, and I'm saying that's okay if there's things we've already
The difference is the questions versus the
analyzed.
change, or something that you want to do differently. So I just like to make sure that if you have a change submitted, that we have the full data response at least by the 22nd, so that the 25th is valued, that you have the information. So,
Mayor,
yes, Mr. Driggs.
what I hear Ms. Mayfield saying that I agree with is we don't want to close the door completely today, right?
Yes, I think
So,
everybody's, is anyone have any
It's not
concern?
primarily about the questions, it's just we're not going to close the door today on, which means we have to have a certain time at a future meeting when we're all together where there will be an opportunity to offer other add-deletes. But that has to be done in time for them to be processed before the 25th, when we then do the straw votes. So the question is, Ryan, when do you have to know, when do we have to finish proposing add-deletes so that you can be ready for the straw votes?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, questions today, final questions to us for next week, and give us a heads up of any changes you plan on proposing. And so it gives us a head start on some of them. Nothing becomes official until that 21st meeting where it takes 5 votes, but that time frame could work for us.
But we can't miss the step where 5 of us have to agree on the add-delete, right? So the question is, at what point in time can people offer something else as an add-delete? When will be the last
I'm
opportunity to do
suggesting on the
that?
22nd.
Yeah.
That we do that, because then the final vote would be the 25th, and that would be on a council day that we would start early, and you would have to have your changes, as deletes, whatever we are calling them, by the 22nd.
And you can handle getting more add-deletes on the 22nd and being ready by the 25th?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. As long as they're things that we got a heads up on, or at least most of them are things we got a heads up on. Most of the things we can do in that time frame. I can't imagine at that point it's going to be 30 things.
So recognizing you might get a heads up, you might look at it, but it might not get the 5 votes on the 22nd.
Exactly.
At least you'd have a head start.
Yes, and if
All
it
right.
doesn't get the 5 votes, we just don't talk about it.
So, yeah, we notify as soon as possible of anything we want to try to propose on the 22nd, so you can think about it. The 22nd, there will be a session in which we have one more opportunity to offer add deletes, and then it's over, right? And I agree with Ms. Mayfield. I think it was kind of hard to process this on such a short time frame. Thank you.
So may I have a motion that the Charlotte City Council hold a council budget adjustment meeting on May the 22nd at 1 PM, I think.
So
that's-
moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Everybody got it?
Question, hold on.
Everybody gotta check their calendars now.
Yeah, please, I mean, it is agenda day, so that's what I was trying to say. It's a Monday.
Yeah.
You be here, and if we did it like at 1, we could get that through that, and if there's extra time, but it's better to have more time in anticipation of what might be a change so that we can do that, so.
I was gonna sleep in that day.
I'm sorry, Mayor, could you please repeat the motion for me?
The motion is that the Charlotte City Council will hold a council budget adjustment meeting on Monday, May 22nd at 1:30, or 1 o'clock?
1:30.
1:30 for the conversation on the final budget
We really need 4
changes.
hours?
We have a motion and a second for that. All in, any
Discussion.
discussion?
Could we possibly do it closer to the start of the meeting date? The
That's
meeting
not
time?
gonna give enough time.
I don't think we need 3 hours for the follow-up.
I thought
We
you
should
just
get the
wanted
work
to get
done
together
now.
and enjoy each other's company.
No, we wanna work. or I think we wanna work
I think
smart.
it should start later.
Well,
Suggestion.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes. How about we just go over the Q&A now with everyone being in the room? If Mr. Bergman can just spend an hour to go over all the question and answer, there are not that many. Some of them are very straightforward. So if that 20-second meeting doesn't work for everyone, this will give us an opportunity.
Shoot, sorry. We went through the process of what we were going to do today.
Body is the worst body on the planet.
So can we please finish this one before we
Yes,
go
ma'am.
to the next one?
But 20 seconds.
We have a motion on the floor.
I have a discussion question.
A discussion question, Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to follow up something similar to what Ms. Ajmira was saying. Could we, maybe, since we don't know how much time that we'll need, and we've spent a
30.
lot of time on this right now, can we table this motion, do the work, and see, excuse me, see how much time we might need at the end of the session so we can make a better informed decision about what we want the next meeting to look like?
That sounds
think
good.
I think it was very clear what Ms. Mayfield was saying about what she wanted to accomplish.
Wanted more time.
And now we've got it. So I think we're really just having a motion whether or not, and if you want to change the time of it, then say, I want to change the time from 1:30 to whatever. But right now, we have a motion on the floor that's been properly second for a meeting on the 22nd at 1:30 for the budget adjustment meeting. So, any further discussion? Yes, Madam Clerk.
Who seconded?
Mr. Driggs seconded the motion. Ms. Mayfield made the motion, the original motion. So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands.
We come out on time.
Okay, the motion is for the Charlotte City Council to schedule a meeting on Monday, the 22nd, for council budget adjustments at 1:30 PM in the afternoon. That's what the motion is. It was made by Ms. Mayfield after a lot of help, and thank you, Ms. Mayfield, and you seconded it, Mr. Driggs. All right, so, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2. We have,
So I would like to make a substitute motion, if I
So
may.
it's a new
Okay.
motion now. We've already,
Okay, so no substitute motion.
no substitute motion. You want a motion?
No, I'm good. Let's move forward.
Okay, so let me make sure that everybody has what I said. Hey, guys, please, just a minute. First, we're gonna go around the room in order. We'll start with Ms. Ajmira, and each council member gets to comment on anything that they would like to about the manager's proposed budget. At the end of that, your comments about the budget, then if you have any changes that you are recommending, then please state those for the staff to be able to put them in a statement that everybody understands, making sure you sign off on that statement. And then at the end of that, we will come back around and do the votes for each one of the changes recommended. So we will finish up after everyone has had a chance to speak and have any recommended changes they would like to. Then the voting will begin. So that's the process in play, and now that's where we'll go ahead and start. So, Ms. Ajmira, comments on the budget and any changes that you would like to see represented. I'm sorry. Oh, you want to give them, you want to talk about that first? I had in my note, it said that you were going to talk about it afterwards. Okay, we're going to talk about how much money is available for adjustments. Okay,
None.
all right, Mr. Jones.
So, thank you, Mayor, members of council. What we typically do before we start the budget adjustments is try to give you any updates as it relates to revenue, any updates on the expenditure side. So I guess just a couple things, and I'll leave all these notes aside to save time. I do appreciate the work that the team put together to provide this additional information. I do understand the desires of Ms. Mayfield and other council members to have the information in front of them as soon as possible so that they're not scrambling to make decisions. So hopefully as we go through this, for any additional clarification, we'll be able to do that. And we have a number of directors in the room in case that's needed. So we typically start off with where we are on the revenue side. And if you go into the document, the 20-some page document, the first one just really talks about where we start off on the sources side. So in the budget, there was 101,000 and some change that was unallocated, and that's something that we typically do in the budget process, and that's in the general fund. So think about that as being an ongoing revenue source that could be attached to any ongoing expenditure. A little differently this year, we had $250,000 in PAYGO that's also unprogrammed. And with that, think about that as really something that's one-time in nature, that's in the PAYGO system that can be used. And I'll tell you that, we have a great team between budget finance and everybody on the team. If there's some things we have to do in terms of adjustments, in terms of, PAYGO, general fund, ARPA, one-time ongoing, I believe we have the capability of doing that. But for right now, I just want to make sure I'm laying out the buckets the right way. When I started the budget, we talked about $21 million in ARPA funds that's related to housing. Remember, a year ago, we started at $55 million. You've done some incredible things, initiatives, and we had about $21 million left. We're only showing 17 because if you do agree to the proposal for the homes program, which is a joint program with the city and the county, and I fully expect the county to also put money into that program, it would come from the ARPA funds for housing, leaving about $17 million. And then lastly, I would say that we have $3.7 million in the ARPA jobs workforce development category that's also unallocated. We did talk to you a little bit about some other funds that's related to payments in lieu, and that is available too. But I guess what I'm trying to say is let's start off with, and I'll just make it simple, that $101,469 in the general fund, the $250 in PAYGO, And then we have roughly $400,000 on the ARPA side for city operations that was turned back into the city. We had it for solid waste services. The process is going through. Those dollars are available. And then lastly, and this is somewhat atypical, on the revenue side, we received sales tax numbers for February this morning. It's always a lag. And we roughly have about $456,000. That is more than what our estimate is. And we believe that it's safe to extrapolate that out as something that would be ongoing also. So roughly $1.2 million in resources that would be available for discussions today. I will say that a couple other things that occurred, and I don't know what's the right way to do this, but it was very clear in the public hearing that hourly employees had concerns about compensation, and we really heard a lot of that from you in the meetings that we had earlier this week. There were some concerns about fire and the pay plan as it relates to the public safety, police, and fire. And then I would say, lastly, there were some discussions around CF, but not necessarily negative, more so, let's say, positive. So as we start to talk about this, and I'll leave this up to you, Mayor and Council, that from a, I guess, a principle standpoint, philosophy, it was how can we do as least amount of harm to the individuals who are least likely to be able to afford any type of increases, whether it's property tax increase or let's say even utilities. And so as we started to put all the information together, while you didn't ask this specifically, at some point we'd like to provide you with maybe a way to address some of the concerns that we heard on Monday night as it relates to our lowest paid hourly employees, to be able to do something more than that 6% bump for FY 2024. But again, that's just something that in the right time, we'd like to be able to discuss that with you. And then lastly, one of the things that was asked on Monday is what's the value of that 1 cent if you put 1 penny on the property tax. And I do believe that's on page 3 at the bottom of page 3. So that 1 cent on the property tax is worth $21 million to the general fund. And the way that we've described this each time there's a reval is we do the median home value. So the impact to the median home value, which is $349,700, would be $34 a year. So I just put that out there because that's something that had been asked. What is the impact if you raise the property tax by 1 cent? And so you can multiply that by 2 if it were 2 cents, 3 if it's 3 cents. And also, what is the impact on, let's say, that median home value? So may I just put that out there? And typically, again, we do talk about what has changed since the last time that we met. And so that's trying to get as many resources that's available to you before you start deliberations.
Would the council like to hear the information on the hourly wages and the issues that the manager says he has information that was not perhaps asked directly in that respect, but would you like to hear that information in advance of the questions? Yes. Anyone objecting to that? All right, Mr. Jones, why don't you go ahead and provide that information?
So, I'll set it up and then I'll turn it over to Ryan. Again, this is not inconsistent with some of the ways we have addressed some of our lowest paid employees. And I believe that this is, and thank you so much for allowing us to put it on the table. I think that when we start to think about equity, our hourly employees and our lowest paid employees, this could be a pathway forward within the resources that I suggested earlier. So Ryan, if you could talk us through it.
Sure. And it did.
What page we're on?
This part isn't in. So it didn't just start Monday night, it also started Monday with some of the discussions that we had with council members, one-on-ones and things about that for concerns and questions on the budget, a lot of questions about equity and things of that nature. So we started looking around at things we've done in the past, things that other cities do. One thing we did in the past, a few years ago, maybe about 4 years ago now, is we set a minimum raise, like a per hour rather than a percent raise for some hourly employees. And then taking it a step further, last year, we were fortunate to have enough ARPA funds to give out a percentage bonus one time to all employees. And we did that in a way where there was essentially a floor. Like even if you made less than this, it's still at least $500 for each bonus. So what we did is, if you took the hourly employees and rather than just saying it's 3% in July and 3% in January, instead you said it's a minimum of $1,800 in July or January. What essentially happens is that nothing changes for anybody over $60,000. But for everybody under $60,000, you get a reasonable increase from that. At the very bottom, that increase would be over 8% for our lowest paid employees. And that would be a general fund cost of roughly $480,000. And the cost on the enterprise funds is negligible enough that it wouldn't have an impact on rate models or anything like that. And then taking it one step further to protect people at the very bottom as well. Talking to our economist quite a bit, and one of the ways that he has projected cost of living in Charlotte in the past is in your packet on page 5.
Actually, you can also see the hourly employee information on page 4, because it explains a lot about the merit dates,
Yeah.
the market adjustments, and the 2 dates. And so what was 3 and 3 then becomes something around total of 8 instead of 6.
Right. And so what this essentially does is it uses data points that we have that says no more than 30% of your income should go to housing. And it uses the average household in Charlotte, which is 2.47, to project what is needed for a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's $46,200. And so on top of what I just described, for additional dollars, you could, by January, essentially create that as a pay floor. And so it's $46,200 for a 40-hour-a-week employee. That would be about $22 an hour. Those two things combined, if done together, would be a general fund impact of about $540,000. And what it does is the very bottom, the people that are only making $41,600, they would get an 11% increase in this budget. The people at about $45,000 would get an 8% increase, $50,000, about a 7.2% increase by January, and then for everybody $60,000 and above, there's no change from what was projected. So I know that's a lot, but that was our attempt to try to address some of your concerns and some of the other concerns as kind of a possibility.
Okay, what we talked about was having everyone have a comment on the budget before, instead of just going through. I just wanted us to get the information out on the table. So I'd like to do is go back to our process and begin with Ms. Ajmira and Ms. Johnson and Ms. Mayfield to start comments generally overall on the budget and any changes at the end of your comments overall on the budget. Ms. Ajmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, let me first comment on what Mr. Bergman presented. I think that's a great idea. Do you need a motion for that to make that change?
We're going to do motions at the end.
Okay, well, I'll just say I will support that, and if I need to make a motion at the end, I will, because that addresses some of our hourly employees' concerns around being able to afford to live in our city. So appreciate the work, Ryan, your team has done to come up with this creative solution to address equity concerns. Also, if you can go to slide question number 10, where you have minimum $20 an hour, where question number 10. Okay, so how would that apply in this scenario? And that, I guess, would that apply to our public safety employees as well?
Well, it's two different calculations. What I just talked about is the minimum salary needed to live in Charlotte, cost of living, which was $46,200. Everyone in fire would already be above the total. The difference would be because fire works 52 hours a week before there's any overtime, which is not our rule, that's Fair Labor Standard Act rule. There's a different per hour calculation for fire.
So it's just to follow up on that, Madam Mayor. So since fire works 52 hours a week schedule, how much would it cost to bring, and I'm sorry, as Ms. Mayfield said, none of, well, at least I agree with her, many of us didn't get an opportunity to read all of this, review all of this, because this was just sent earlier today, so I'm trying to do both at the same time. How much would it cost the city to make minimum pay for fire to $20 an hour?
Yeah, so first I want to apologize about that. I think, as we learn next year, we'll try to schedule maybe budget adjustments 2 weeks after than 1 week after, so we have more time. It was trying to get things done from Monday to Thursday was a little bit problematic. So what we have here is if we wanted to bring fire up to $20 an hour in this upcoming budget, there's two ways that you would do it, could do it. So those are the two bullets that you see on the screen. You can basically eliminate the first step of firefighter 1, which is actually similar to what we did in the police pay plan, same concept. There's a little bit of compression where you have different classes together, but they don't leapfrog each other, so it's not as problematic. But that would cost about $135,000 to do it that way. The other way you can do it is leave the fire pay plan unchanged, but basically require that we do not pay less than $10.40 weekly. The pay plan would be the same, but some of the people in step 1 would get a little bit extra money from that. As it is, the people who in the current plan would be below $20 an hour would be the step 1 firefighters who don't have any education or military incentives. And it's really only becomes a problem after they graduate from the academy for, I think, like a 4-month period. Because while they're in the academy, they're actually 40-hour employees. So I know that's a lot, but those two steps would both get them to $20 an hour in different ways.
Yeah, I will need to take some time to read through this but I firmly believe that I think we got to ensure that we have minimum pay for all our employees, including fire, to at least $20 an hour. So I think this is where I would like recommendations from Mr. Manager as to what, out of those two options, what would be the most appropriate. So if you can provide that recommendation. So I had made two proposals. First was the fire minimum pay to $20 an hour, and second, pretty much I support Mr. Bergman's recommendations on hourly pay and making sure that we are being equitable in that. And Mr. Manager, I know you talked about how much funds that are unprogrammed, especially from the ARPA bucket. So I just want to make sure I got that correctly. You said $17 million after the homes program with the county? So that's after,
Correct.
so we have $17 million from that.
And if you
then
chose not to do the homes program, you would have the 21 million.
If we do the homes program, then how much would be?
17, yes.
17.
Yes.
So I would like us to consider how we can leverage $17 million that we have in ARPA towards one-time bonus for our, to address concerns that were raised at the public forum from our city employees, especially Charlotte Water and Solid Waste. And I think those were the employees, hourly employees that, but pretty much how can we look at this pool of funding that's available to address some of their concerns around just being able to afford to live in our city? So if you can provide some recommendations on that. And I just want to give kudos to Ryan and his team. They've done a great job, and they've worked around the clock to address some of the questions. And I know I've asked many questions, and they have provided answers right away, and I really appreciate the work. And Mr. Manager, kudos to you. This is a big lift for you. This is a 5th straight year without a single property tax increase, while continuing to invest more to address our community needs and investing more in our employees. Hats off to you, because you understand that we cannot displace people while continuing to invest in our infrastructure and our community needs, such as affordable housing. So I'm absolutely impressed by your financial skill set, and I look forward to getting some of those questions addressed at a later time. Thank you.
All right,
May I?
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Councilman Ashmore. I really appreciate this, and the team does too. One thing I want to make sure for clarity, item, I guess line 14 and 15 may be in opposition to each other, and just let me tell you why. So when we started off with $20 per hour, it was for our general employees who have a 40-hour week. When you look at item 15, line 15, I believe all in the proposal earlier would have individuals making $22 an hour. But once again, that's general employees, 40 hours a week. So I just want to make sure that as we do this, that you don't come back and say, well, that's not what I intended.
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again. I lost you there.
Right, so what Ryan suggested earlier would end up having a 40-hour week individual making a little bit more than $22 an hour. Your item, line 14, says have a fire minimum pay of $20 an hour. If you're fine with that, it's all good.
Well, and just to also clarify, though, the $22 an hour general fund employees, they would make $46,200 by the end of the year without any overtime. And at $20 an hour, the fire employees would make about $54,000 a year without overtime. So I think he's just drawn that distinction. And so the hourly rates will be different, the total rates will be different. It's because of the different hours in the Fair Labor Standards Act.
So, if I may follow up on that, Madam Mayor. So with number 15, what would be the hourly pay for fire employees with the implementation of number 15?
The very trainees who graduate from the academy for that 4-month period would be $20 an hour if they don't have any education incentives or military incentive.
Okay, so that will already bring them to $20 an hour.
That'll bring them to $20 an hour.
Okay, so what you're saying ultimately, it's pretty much repeating what we are already doing in number 15? Because number 14 is already being covered by number 15.
No, I think what the manager's saying is there two different things, two different groups of employees with different hours per week. What he is just making sure is clear is we would be bringing all hourly employees to an annual salary of $46,200. All firefighters would make more than that. But what he's saying is if you tried to do it in an hourly way, our lowest paid hourly employees would make $22 an hour, and the lowest paid fire employees, the ones that I mentioned, would make $20 an hour.
Got it.
That's all.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to go over and ask the person across the room, Ms. Watlington, for her comments and any changes. Ms. Ajmira, thank you for modeling that behavior of get it out there, make your changes really out there and up front. So, Ms. Watlington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm confused now. You said you were coming around this way, so just keep me clarified.
Ms. Molina just got here, and we just had to explain what we were doing, so I just decided to go across the hall. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the record, Victoria Watlington, Charlotte City Council District 3.
Is there a doctor in the building? Is there a doctor?
Not that can save your life. Thank you, I appreciate it. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, kudos again. I want to agree with my colleagues on that, to the manager and to Mr. Bergman, because you did great work here. I know we were up against a ton this year, and message received that you can't make magic twice, so we know we've got work to do for next year. But I'm very pleased with what I've seen overall for the budget, so I've got just a couple of comments, and I will keep it brief. I did have a follow-up question for our next discussion. In regards to some of the items that we had asked about during this session and preparing for this fiscal year, there were some items that were going to be baked into the ARPA, whether it was workforce development, those kinds of things. I'm just curious as to how those things ended up in this year's budget. And I just want to make sure that as we're having these conversations again, and with the ARPA dollars that are left, that those things are included. So that's one I'd like to see some follow-up for. And then secondly, I'm looking at, in particular, our financial partners, and I wanted to lift up two things. The first one, and I know Councilmember Graham has stepped out, so I'll pitch it for him in the moment. I noticed there were a couple of organizations that applied that I didn't see on the final list, and one I wanted to lift up was For the Struggle. And I'll leave it to Councilmember Graham to discuss that a little bit more, but that was one I'd be very interested in seeing if there's an opportunity.
What page?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 46, 45 and 46. And so what I see here is our summary of financial partners that ultimately made it into the budget, and I'm comparing that against our financial partner application. So there were just a couple that I don't see listed here, and I know we had a little bit of funds left, so I wanted to lift that one up For the Struggle. And like I said, I know Councilmember Graham is leading the way on that one, but I just want to offer my support on some funding for the Struggle, whatever that ends up being. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about real briefly was, as we look at our dedicated revenue sources, our MSDs. So I know we've had some conversations around the MSD scope as it relates to beautification, litter, and safety, public safety. So a lot of us that have districts in our districts know that we hear from our constituents all the time about policing, particularly over the weekends or when we're having events, and also litter and trash pickup. So I want to, and this is really a question I think for the manager and for staff, is to understand, as we are going to be, it looks like, asked to contribute 62% of the funding to Center City Partners and 83% to University City Partners, what can we expect to receive as it relates to that? Or how do we, because, and this is how I feel about it, if we need to reallocate some of these dollars specifically to our internal public safety in order to ensure that we've got appropriate coverage, I'd rather make that adjustment. But if it's possible to understand what their plans are in order to help support that, then I would be open to that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Watlington. I was the first to say it. I'll use for example, and I think what you just asked for is additional information, but in the scope of services, and you said Center City Partners, specifically, there's community safety, housing and neighborhood development, transportation and planning. There's also environmental sustainability, as well as economic development. So I think there's an opportunity to have a discussion about how those funds are spread across those different categories. And maybe that's something that when the different organizations come to the committees, that there could be some level of discussion about how the allocation works.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
So I want to make sure, does that mean that we're going to deal with that issue in committee?
Yes, if there's anything that we need to make sure that we put our eyes on before the budget piece, like if we find out that, well, we don't really have the allocations, or there's something that needs to be handled from a budgetary standpoint, definitely would like to include it in these discussions. But if it's a matter of we can manage that ongoing in committee, I'm fine with that as well.
And we'll reach out to Center City Partners and University City Partners with the question under this scope for them to provide additional information.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Ms. Watlington, any other changes?
Oh, thanks.
All right. Ms. Molina, I think, did you talk?
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Molina?
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't see anything specifically that I guess I'm targeting. There's a few things that I care deeply about that I'd like to make sure that we emphasize, and that is workforce development. That is something that I came to council, and the people of East Charlotte entrusted me with raising that up as an area of opportunity for particularly East Charlotte, but I know that it's something that we need to deal with across our city. So workforce development and small businesses, because also we have a whole lot of small businesses in East Charlotte where, as a previous small business owner, I remember wanting to, get started and not having proper resources and being a one-woman show for many of the years in getting started. So I just like to lift that up. And I also would like to echo, both of my colleagues in saying thank you both. Thank you all for the work that you've done to pull this budget together. I know that this is not easy. I also, while I have the liberty to speak, our workers that came to see us and express their concerns, I hope that they know that we hear them, and that, as a council, I can speak personally for myself and not for anyone else, but I'd like to see us take a concerted look at what we can do to relieve some of those concerns. I know that inflation and being able to afford to live in our city is becoming more difficult, no matter where you are on the spectrum. But for those of us who make a certain amount of money, it's much harder than for those of us who don't. And so however we can make that easier, I'd like to see us take a good, strong look at that as well. So other than that, that's all I have. Oh, Dr. Watlington, I love you, sis. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Yep.
Okay. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also like to echo my colleagues in thanking Marcus and your team for the hard work on the budget and the balanced budget. So thank you for that. I applaud you. I saw at the beginning the distinguished budget presentation. So, you do a great job with that. So thank you. I want to just lift up my support for the increase for the hourly employees, and also for the firefighters. I heard them when they came out Monday night, and one of the questions that was asked was to explain the historic difference in pay between the police and fire employees and the projected cost of maintaining this parity. So I know that information is listed here in this packet, so we'll have a chance to look at that. But I do think that their pay should be more equal. And one thing I thought was very interesting, I saw a unity from the fire department when they came and talked about that it wasn't just some employees or some groups. This was a unified request. So I definitely support that. I also want to support, there was a question about council having another employee or support person for us. And I noticed the question, the amount to do that, looks like we were looking at about $92,000 per person. The answer says to have 5 more full-time people, it would be, I'm looking for the answer now, it would be about $400,000. And I don't think we're asking for each of us to have a full-time person. I think we would be looking more as a higher level support person, maybe to do policy research. It wouldn't take 5 additional people. You and I have spoken over the past few months about the need for me to have additional assistance. With all of the zonings, I think our residents expect for a city the size of ours and part-time council members that we would have more than to split between 2 council members, a support person who checks our emails and schedule. There's so much more to our work. And I think our residents deserve so much more attention and responsiveness. So I would like to see, I'd support an additional staff member, full-time staff member to support council as a whole, if that's 1 or 2 people, to do some research around that. Yeah, I think it's necessary, the rezoning coordinations, all of that. So I wanted to bring that up. I also wanted to ask about the capital projects in District 4. I know there wasn't an answer. Can you give me just a little update on the capital projects on District 4? In District 4, my question was the status of the existing capital projects that were listed as over budget. So can you give me some detail about that, please?
Yeah, so that's on page 16, which is question 25. We listed 7 projects at the February workshop, budget workshop, that we considered to be over budget based on some of the inflationary pressures. So this proposed budget provides $27.4 million to address all 7 of those projects. So specifically in District 4, that's $7.8 million for the Research Drive J.W. Clay Connector over I-85 Bridge. And there's 2 more projects that we were able to take care of with project savings, which were Monroe Road Streetscape and then Northeast Corridor Infrastructure Program, which I assume that's the District 4 one?
Yeah, it's a McCullough Drive.
Yeah. McCullough Drive, the NICI program. So to answer your question, the District 4 and the other projects that we listed as over budget have been addressed in this budget.
Which one is the McCullough Drive?
The one, it's not on the table because it's being taken care of with existing project savings, but it's like the last sentence, second to last sentence of the write-up right there.
So does that include the McCullough Extension and Streetscape that includes the light poles and banners?
Yes, McCullough Drive, the whole streetscape.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Huh?
Yes, it's the McCullough Streetscape project.
That includes light poles and the banner hardware, right?
I'm going to maybe defer to Jennifer Smith. I think is probably watching in 280.
And the reason I ask is because these were these projects were approved by voters in transportation bonds in 2014, 2016, 18, and 20. So we want to make sure that we are delivering the promises that have been supported by the voters. So I wanted some clarification on what those projects included. Also, the Dave McKinney extension. I know that that's at risk. And J.W. Clay Streetscape that included light poles and hardware. And that anticipated start date was 2016.
Yeah, the J.W. Clay connector, that's the one that's the biggest or second biggest one at about $8 million of additional funds that we put in. As for the specifics of McCullough, we'll bring up our city engineer, Jennifer Smith.
Well, okay, yeah, because streetscape and bridge are two different things. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on what's being approved. That's already been voted on. Thanks.
Yeah, so the streetscape project, it does include the signs that will be posted on that streetscape project, McCullough Drive. And then I apologize, I was walking, so what was the question on the bridge?
JWK streetscape?
Yeah, so that one is funded as well, as part of the NICI program.
Okay, if I can get like anticipated start dates? And maybe not today, but if you can
Yep.
send that information.
Yeah, I don't have
Also
those off the top of my head, but.
Okay, yeah, and the Dave McKinney extension?
So that one, we were coordinating with a developer out in that area, and that developer has kind of fallen through, so we're evaluating costs for that project right now.
Okay, and you said the McCullough extension.
The McCullough extension, so we hope that all the money that we're getting, we haven't bid that project yet, will cover both the McCullough Drive and the extension. But we haven't bid the project yet, so once we bid the project, we'll know a more definite cost on the project. But the money that we had requested was to build both segments.
Okay, and is it, and just the McCullough Drive and the McCullough extension, that's what was requested and approved in the bond dollars, is that correct?
So the bonds were for the NICI program, and several projects were identified out of the NICI program.
Okay,
The intent of the program was to really go as far as we can on all the projects with the money we have.
okay. Well, I just want to lift those up because those have been approved by voters. We know that the costs have increased, but that's due to inflation because of those delays. They were originally requested and approved in 2014. So I do want to keep those lifted for District 4. And also those street banners. I know we're looking at, the Monroe Road, that's great, but we've been requesting those in District 4 for a while. Also, I wanted to ask about Heal Charlotte. There was a request for Heal Charlotte.
So for our partners?
Huh?
Under partners?
Yeah, under partners.
So,
Give us a dollar amount.
so
Oh, you want a dollar amount?
Yeah.
Okay, oh,
That's what
okay.
you're doing. You need
Okay,
to-
cool. I'd like to request the $1.2 million. I believe that was the amount. And I know he submitted a request to provide housing for homeless individuals in one of the hotels on Sugar Creek. Councilmember Mayfield and I had the pleasure of taking Sean Heath over there, looking at the project. He's doing great work, case management, again, housing homeless, and working with homeless families. So I do want to lift that up, the $1.2 million for Heal Charlotte.
Ms. Johnson, just a clarification. Are you asking from the housing ARPA funds? Is that what you mean, or does it not matter?
It's not that it doesn't matter. I mean, I'll let the experts work on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
they're already, I think working on that, but I didn't see it in the partners and just wanted to kind of know what the status of that was.
Yeah, and I mean, similar to how we've done in the past, our proposed budget maintained level funding for the discretionary financial partners, with the exception of Race Matters for Juvenile Justice, which was the only one that we added. And the reason for that is because Community Relations has worked with them extensively the last few years, and we've found ways to fund them within the budget. So this was more like formalizing an existing relationship.
Okay, and so perhaps I should, that number is subject to change. I don't want to make that a final number because Mr. Jackson has submitted a proposal. So I know that's being reviewed, whatever the most feasible and whatever funds that project, then that's what I'm requesting. I want that to be reviewed. I want to lift up that project.
All right.
Publicly. Thank you.
Okay, I want
Okay.
to recognize the manager on this one.
Okay?
So thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Did you actually get a financial partners request from Hill Charlotte? I don't, okay, so I think.
What?
I think we have two separate things going on. Okay, so what's going on is that Sean Heath, and Sean, don't worry, I'm not going to call you up.
Yeah, I was waiting on you. Look, you're
He has been working with a number of grassroots nonprofits that are trying to help us with housing. And Kenny Robinson is one, as well as what's happening with Mr. Jackson. And so Sean has some concepts that I think you would like, and I think we're queuing you up on the 22nd. Is that right?
I'll be ready for it.
And it would come from ARPA, right?
Okay.
Part of the 17 million that's left over for ARPA. So that is what Sean has been working on. And I think that's why you saw the stairs over there, because housing has been working on it as opposed to budget.
Okay.
And then just so we don't miss it, you had said pay parity for fire as one of them as well, that we should
Okay.
add on here, right? Yeah.
Yes. So then, is Heal Charlotte, the $1.2 million, that's kind of considered differently, or should we leave that up there?
I don't know if that's the right number, but I do believe that what you're saying is that as you and a number of council members toured the facility with Sean, that you believe that's a good investment in the housing realm as it relates to our ARPA funds, and we don't disagree. Trying to figure out what that right number is. I don't want you to say a wrong
Right,
number.
I don't
or
want to
me
say the
either.
wrong number, yeah, I'm really.
But, yeah, so I know there's some concepts about a ground lease and things like that, but Sean does have that information.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just believe in investing in that work. It's good soil. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Bergman and your team, thank you for the detailed information and for getting us the answers to the question. I have a couple of clarifying questions. Going back to page 4 and thinking about what we started talking about, which is my colleague's item number 15. I want clarification on that 1,800 that you mentioned. So opposed, what you're recommending, and if not, please correct me, is currently we're saying hourly employees receive 2 separate 3% increases. So eliminate that. Are we saying $1,800 total, which is the equivalent, or are we saying two $1,800 increases, making it actually $3,200?
Two different, basically, you would get the
Or
greater,
36.
the greater of, if, as an hourly employee, you'd get the greater of 6% or 2 $1,800 increases. So it'd be 3,600 total for the year. But the second one would come in January, which is similar to how we did the pay plans last year.
So it would still be this July 1 and January 6, but opposed to 3%, it will be, we're clear, $1,800 July 1, additional $1,800 January.
At least 1,800. If you make
Up
more than,
to.
yeah. Well,
As
no,
long as
at
you make
least.
under 60,000.
Yes.
Okay. Also, this question is really a tag team between you and our economists, because I think you mentioned when you gave the overview, sticking with the very next page, page 5, this breakdown that the Charlotte MSA table says what we think one unit bedrooms are in Charlotte. I really would like some more information on how we came up with these numbers, because there are, just doing a standard search. So if I was a resident, which I am a resident in the city, but if I was looking for an apartment right now, there are exactly 56 units that come up that are under $1,000 for a 1-bedroom, and 41 units total that come up for a 2-bedroom for $1,155. So help me understand how these numbers were identified to say that using the two-bedroom estimate, an annual wage of $46,200 would allow an employee to live in Charlotte. I really want to know how we got those numbers and where you living.
Sure, I'm a little intimidated because I'm by Dr. Watlington and Dr. Tazafar.
It is okay.
But
You know the experts around you.
we'll bring up Indem. Indem, the question is, what is the data source that produces these numbers?
So Mayor and Council, that number comes from Housing and Urban Development. They generate these fair market rents. That's where we got the data from.
So I actually reached out and checked with staff in Housing and Neighborhood Development, and that's why I have a challenge. This feels a little that we're undervaluing what's happening right now in the market. These numbers can be very real in 2020, 2019. But for 2023, just the standard search on your own, if you were one of our residents, especially since we had employees come to us that spoke to us regarding the fact that they are living in hotels. Because the other challenge with this idea is even if you were able to access one of these units at this 46, most apartment complexes in their application process have that you need to make 3 times the rent that's due. That is a major barrier and a major challenge. So if you don't show that you make 3 times that $996, and if we're saying that you were able to calculate the numbers, and this is what the salary should be if only 30% of your salary is going towards housing, we have a disconnect in real numbers and what we think on paper the numbers should be. So again, if we can just do basic search on your own, if you were the individual looking for housing, not just taking these numbers that are an aggregate, because a lot of these numbers are aggregate numbers that you all have to use, but if we just look at real impact, and there are physically units available, less than 60 units that are at this $996 price, but even if you were to go in, and that is starting at under $1,000. I think we have a challenge in what we're saying, especially when in January we had a report out when we had our Housing and Jobs Summit where it was noted more than once that you need to earn at least $25 to $27 an hour to afford the cost of living in the city of Charlotte today. So for me, when we're looking at this breakdown, I would like for us to pull some real numbers in response to question number 5, because the real numbers aren't necessarily going to reflect $46,200. I'm not saying we have the time to do it now, but let's do a survey with our employees that make that and find out where they're living. Because if we have employees, based on those who were brave enough to come down and share their stories on Monday, that are living in vehicles, living in hotels, you're paying much more than this in a hotel over a month's period. I want to make sure that we're really being accurate, and if that is not the case, in order to be able to live in the city right now, I don't know what that number is, but that's the number that I'm going to be working on over the next couple of days to be a part of my recommendation for if we're going to be moving forward with thinking about a salary, what that annual salary needs to look like, and how do we move our employees up. I have concerns with the idea of using the proposal of using ARPA as a bonus without knowing what is that new salary going to be, because giving a one-time bonus when the cost of living is going up every year is a challenge. Unless we're gonna figure out a way to give everyone a $5,000 one-time bonus, and also think about what is the financial impact of that. So if we have employees who receive any additional assistance, we very well could knock them out of the assistance, Social Security, other assistance they may receive. We also risk the chance of if we have employees that have a subsidy or any assistance, that might knock them out, not to mention you're putting them into a different pay bracket potentially for that 1 year versus what does your ongoing salary need to be, and how do we make sure that it's growing, your salary is going to the level where it can compensate for healthcare and the other choices. So not trying to pull money from ARPA funds, looking at what is that percentage. You presented, which was really wonderful, what would that 1 cent look like out of those funds? I believe you had that on page 3. So on page 3, the revenue generated from a 1 cent property tax increase would be 21.12 million. From that, what would it look like to get our employees at that, instead of 46, to get them to 50, if we need a number? So instead of 46,200, what would it look to get, again, not think about those that are over 60,000, but our lowest paid workers, to get them to 50,000, if we were to do the 1 cent, and out of the current dollars, not using, out of our current revenue generating dollars, not using the ARPA funds, because those are one-time funds, what would that look like going forward? Would be very helpful.
Yeah, and just so I can, you're correct. I believe that data source is only updated annually. And so essentially, we're using data from probably 7 or 8 months ago that'll be updated again, so it's maybe not totally representative. So we'll get you that data at 50,000. We'll also ask Indem to do some work on projecting what it'll look like when they do update it, and get you that information.
That would be very helpful for me. Also, when I'm looking at the summary of our financial partners, you can catch me up on this since I wasn't here for a couple of years. So going to page 46 in the book, the summary of our financial partners, our dedicated revenue sources. A number of years ago, then council, we had identified basically a 3-year window to receive funds, because we had many discussions about no organization really having to depend on government dollars moving forward. So can we get breaking down, as Dr. Watlington noted, what's our financial benefit with our current dedicated revenue sources and partners between Center City, because I don't think government should be 60+% of any funding. If we utilize the same model that we utilize when we're looking at a housing and neighborhood services development of that but-for, and that but-for being 20 to 30%, we should be the smallest amount of tax dollars in some of these. So it would be helpful to know, as was mentioned, a follow-up of what is that breakdown. But for me, I will also like a update on the general fund discretionary. How many of these partners are at that 3-year versus past that 3-year? And if they've gone past that 3-year, and if you all had, if council had made a change, please provide that language, because we had, as a body, had voted and had a lot of conversation about a window for our partners, because it's better for them, so that they're not so reliant on government dollars. This was to help you get on your feet, create whatever funding sources you need, an update on all these partners, because ultimately, I don't think government should be, again, a designated line item for some of these, because we have constant needs and our needs are changing, and that very well can be tying us up from other opportunities that may be coming along. And if the organization is successful and is doing nonprofit world, you're really trying to work yourself out of a business if what is happening is successful. It is not necessarily be something you're going to retire from. Yet, at the same time, we want to make sure that we're being consistent, because there were a lot of organizations that were dropped from funding because they hit their 3-year window. We want to make sure that we're having, I would like to ensure that we're having consistency and transparency in that, so that update on all of our general fund discretionary partners, what is that, are they at that 3 years, and if they're past that 3 years, why? I don't have, Mayor and colleagues, all of my actual recommendations yet. I will have those into you by next week, which is unfortunately why my first question was a 30-minute plus conversation. That's all I was saying. I hadn't gotten through all of it the way that I would like to, but for those couple of pieces, I want to make sure that when we're looking at jumping to page 17 in here, item number 27, when we look at this table showing that City of Charlotte hourly employees, how much they earn and the number of employees at that range. So we have our employees at 41,600 to 50,000. So we're saying right now, if I was just looking at this table, we don't have any employees right now that make under 41,000.
That work full-time, correct.
Okay, so we're noting that right now, out of all the current full-time employees, we have no employees earning under 41,600, which is the equivalent of $20 an hour. So we're looking at the request that I made, what would it look like to get those that are under 50, up to 50, and also recognizing those that are at 50, bumping them up to whatever that same equivalent is, because it's not rob Peter to pay Paul, is how do we help people to graduate? Because ultimately, I want as many of our employees living in our city as possible, because you're helping with our tax revenue and our tax base along with that. And if I have any other questions, I will make sure that I get them over to you. But those were the main ones for this piece, and I will make sure that ahead of time, I have my budget recommendations outside of what we have, what with minimum pay. So y'all will figure it out, increase minimum pay to 50,000.
So I want to say this because I think.
No, ma'am, you're not on.
Thank you. I want to make sure, I think every council member, Ms. Mayfield included, everyone, to make sure that what's being posted there is really important, because it's our representation. Since we voted not to do anything further, this is the adjustment day to have it. And so if it's just, I want something like this. So I just want to make sure that we are in a position, because the motion that we made failed, that we have additional budget adjustments. More questions we can answer, but I just want to make sure that everybody gets as much of the information that they need on the table, even if it's framed not as carefully as perhaps we could make that. So.
And I get that, Mayor, which was unfortunately why that 30-minute conversation went left, was that I was trying to give my colleagues more time for us to get things into the budget discussion, if you didn't get a chance to get through this. And even though that did not happen, that's why I am saying publicly in this space, there was not enough time to get through all of these responses and match these responses up to what we had in this book. So I can only speak for me at this point, that I already know, and I just want to advise the manager and his team that I'm going to be submitting the proposal, because even though my colleagues we didn't all get on the same page of understanding what that vote was, not everyone is ready to make proposal recommendations if they haven't even had a chance to go through the whole book. I'm not speaking for them, but for me, going through the book and matching up the answers that was responded, and I hear what you're saying, so hopefully before everybody goes around, we have a chance to come back around again. But right now, I am not in a position as one of the representatives of the city to completely just say, I want to add all these extras, because you got to give me the answer on these questions before I can even know what my recommendation is going to be.
And that's why I brought it up, because I want to make sure everybody's clear on what the motion was. And so, Mr. Baker, if I've confused myself, that's okay. That happens a lot. But in this question, we had the motion about additional adjustments, and then that did not pass. So I just want to make sure that we're following our rules. And I understand Ms. Mayfield has made a really good point. I don't want the mayor to be in a position of saying, or the budget office to say, we have this, and then we have that. Everybody in this room had this conversation, heard it. It was 30 minutes or more of conversation, and that's what happened.
Madam
So,
Mayor.
Mr. Baker, I just want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly. Okay. Ms.
Thank you.
Johnson?
I'll just speak for myself. The earlier discussion, I think that I was waiting on maybe a second motion, because there were at least 4 of us that talked, that we wanted another opportunity, but not necessarily the 22nd at 1 p.m.
Well,
I think Mayor Pro Tem brought up a great point. If we could wait until after we finished, and at the end of this meeting, an opportunity to then, if we want to have another meeting, then we can discuss it. But to close the door right now, I don't think council's on board with that.
I hope I wasn't saying close the door right now. I was just saying, as we go around this room, there is a time for the decision if we want to do more or differently at the end. But I don't want anyone to say that I didn't have my chance to say anything that's up there. I heard what Ms. Mayfield said, but I wanted to make sure that the motion was clear as we're going around through the process.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we didn't have a chance to review this because we just got it. So we all would like more opportunities to serve our citizens and add to this, that today not be the final day. And also, when I was speaking, I asked for another staff member for council,
I think it,
and that's not captured.
Yeah, row 18.
Additional research, okay, all right, thank you.
okay.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, you're up.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm going to echo some of the comments that were made to the city manager, to the budget department. A great job during this tough year for the 5th straight year, no property tax increase. It is always said, Mayor and Council, that your budget should reflect your priorities. And so I do think this budget, from my standpoint, reflects priorities we established in January 31st when we talked about workforce development initiative. City manager, you have added a workforce development and human resources for our employees. And more importantly, you creating a special assistant to you to work on workforce development initiatives. Secondly, we talked a lot about our small businesses and minority business, and you're going to increase the Charlotte business inclusion by $1 million and add 3 new positions to continue that. I would just like to make a note. During the write-up, it talks about amp up in next CLT, which are great, but I would like to have further conversation. We're talking about helping small businesses. It's the startup business I think we need to put a tremendous focus on. As we want Charlotte to be more entrepreneur-friendly, our startup community really would need our assistance. And so if we could look at that as another option, I think it'd be great. And then, of course, corridors opportunity. We're going to put another $5 million to continue to work on corridors. Only question I have, City Manager, is to add 37 positions to the UDO. That is a lot of new people. But I hats off to Allison Craig, the planning department. I do know June 1, it's a new world for them, but 37 just seemed to be a lot added. And so I'd like to just get a feedback. What would be those positions, those new 37 positions as it relates to UDO? And just FYI, let me make sure I have my numbers correct. So ARPA funds remaining, $17 million for affordable housing and $3.7 million for workforce development. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Okay. The only thing I will add, Madam Mayor, up here, I agree with some of the items already up here, so I'm not going to be redundant, but I would like to add a special one in the financial partners is the Carolina Metro Reds. Some of you all might not be familiar with Carolina Metro Reds. They spend time as a safety initiative to make sure young men, they help them not only with the game of sports, but literacy. We all know the statistics. By third grade, if you can't read at a third grade level, then your path for success is always challenged. Carolina Metro Reds does an excellent job of taking young men who might be struggling academically, introducing them to a sport, keeping them off the streets, but more importantly, giving them the skills they need to be successful. So I would like to add that as a financial partner. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. So I would like to read more about Mr. Bergman's proposal. It does sound good, but what I would like to see some context about what the effect of inflation is having on these wages. You know, I hear a lot of good percentages, but you got to wipe some of those percentages off, or at least mark them down if we're actually, you know, if we're dealing with real numbers. You know, that's what's happening. I think we need to really add that context for the entirety of this budget. And I think some of that context, honestly, has been missing in these discussions. Overall, I've been less than enthused about this budget and downright unhappy about it. While it doesn't necessarily have a property tax percentage increase, it's revenue neutral. This budget certainly represents a tax increase for particularly the economically vulnerable members of our community, without generating revenues and resources to adequately fund the priorities that this council and community has set, not just this year, but over the past several years. You know, so I'm looking at what our runway is in the long term, and what the effect of this upcoming budget year is going to have on some of the progress that we have been able to make as a strong community partner with other at-large community efforts. You know, while some things may be out of our control, my concern is that this budget is actually a step back on our community efforts around equity. To that end, how did staff deploy an equity lens or an equity framework in putting this budget together? I didn't see much of that in the presentation. This budget will broaden the equity gaps and make it harder to live while providing modest resources, especially when you consider the effect of inflation on those resources that these tax increases will provide to combat the growth in those equity gaps. Is there anything that we can do here, even if it's using ARPA funds to do things, something like, I don't know, pilot universal basic income to households who will be facing challenges in this upcoming year? I'm concerned that the gains that we made at narrowing the digital divide will be eroded if we don't do more in this budget to double down on the efforts that we made. I don't really understand what we are trying to achieve with our public safety spend. Our law enforcement gap between retirees and hires has more to do with a lack of long-term planning after federal funds were pumped into the system 30 years ago, and we certainly aren't going to solve that with this budget. So what is the goal? You know, we've done a lot of work over the years to get the public safety plan where it is, but we seem to be reactive, and I don't understand where the outcome is. We achieved some of those outcomes. We're certainly not going to narrow those gaps in this budget. Since our firefighters are having to pick up more of the slack that our county medic service provides, then we need to pay the fire service for that and not tell them just to suck it up. If we don't, then our community will feel that pain in the future. Transportation is more expensive, and if people are going to be displaced and therefore going to be living further away from jobs in Charlotte, and cars, again, when you consider inflation, are more expensive, and our public transportation right now is not reliable, and I don't see many strong mobility investments in this budget. What more can we do to ensure, I'm asked, what more can we do to help ensure people can move between home, work, and school? Is there an opportunity to do something like pilot an e-bike subsidy? So people don't have to be burdened by the increased cost of transportation and be able to move about our city. You see, I agree with something that Mr. Mitchell just said. Our values have to be in our budget, but it's easy to do that when our cup runneth over, but it is a real commitment when we do it when times get hard. You know, if the city of Charlotte is really committed in shrinking the equity gaps in our community, we cannot pass this budget as it is. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, let me also lend my voice to Ryan and the budget staff, finance office, and the city manager for really years of good work presenting the city's financial picture, outlook, and budget. The fact that we continue to have a AAA bond rating, that we continue to have enterprise organizations that perform at a high level, demonstrates why the city has the wind to its back and not the wind to our face. That we continue to work within our means, that we continue to fund our priorities, and that we continue to make hard decisions. So I appreciate the efforts. After evaluating the budget in terms of its presentation, again, I think the budget is easy to read, easy to follow, and the cliff notes really work, right? So I really thank you for that. When I looked at the budget and thanking the staff for taking my calls as well and answering questions along the way, and the manager and I have really good conversations when we meet, I see a lot of the ideas and recommendations and my thoughts embedded in the budget already. So I don't have a whole lot to add to it other than to just really comment on the things that are really important to me, and I think they're really important to the community and the citizens that I represent in District 2. And certainly I clearly understand that while I represent a portion of the city, that my view also has to be very broad and wide as relates to providing the type of service necessary, not only for those who live in District 2, but those who live throughout the city of Charlotte. And so I view the budget in that lens as well. The work that we're doing on the Corridors of Opportunity is commendable. The funding is appreciated. And I think that I'm really excited about the steps that we're going to be moving forward outside my own district. I think it's really commendable, and the work that we're doing and the hard choices that we're making, and that we are somewhat progressive in our thinking, and utilizing the resources in ways that historically we haven't done, i.e. like buying a hotel and doing affordable housing and cleaning up a neighborhood, which touch on three very critical points: housing, public safety, and empowering neighborhoods and communities. I think that's forward thinking. The code enforcement and the quality of life issues is where I really want to spend a little bit of time on. I clearly get that we focus on big items all the time. That's sexy, that gets the headlines, but the work that we do in the quality of life space, picking up the trash, responding to code enforcement issues, those issues are extremely important, and I understand how we have invested in those areas, and I think that's very commendable. How we treat people that work for us and with us is extremely important as well, and I certainly concur. If there's anything that we can do to provide additional resources to the hourly workers, I would love to see us do something in that space as well. And if there's also ways to ensure that firefighters feel that they're getting a fair shake, I think is something I would like to, again, to see us do anything further if we can, Mr. Manager. Lastly, Mr. Winston made a number of good points in his presentation. And at some point in time, next year, all the COVID dollars are going to go away, and all the ARPA dollars are going to go away, and the restrictions that I felt in this budget based on the resources that we had are going to be even greater. And the conversation around this table next year around budget time is going to be significantly different than we are having right now. Councilmember Johnson is correct in some cases in reference to infrastructure and making sure that we get ahead of the growth. In many cases, there's a cost to that. Supporting many of the things that the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned that he would like to see in terms of doing things through an equity lens and a wide variety of forward-thinking ideas, there's a cost to that. And some of the things I think we need to do relatively to those same things, I understand that there's a cost to that too, and we'll be having this discussion next year without the ability to go to the piggy bank, i.e. ARPA dollars and COVID funds. They won't be there. And the infrastructure issues will continue to increase and grow. You would think growth pays for itself. It does not, in my perspective. And so the conversation will be really, really different. I think this budget reflects where we are today, and there will certainly be different conversations, probably starting after this budget is approved in June, about the budget of tomorrow. There's no way for this community to get around it. I had a conversation with the mayor on a different subject, and I used the analogy, you can tell people what they want to hear, what they need to know. I choose to tell people what they need to know. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, but it keeps me honest. And I think the citizens of Charlotte need to know that this is a well-run city, that we pay our bills within our ability, that we have the ability to do multiple things at a time on different sides of the city based on our balance books and our ability to prioritize and pay the bills. And so I just hope that we have the fortitude and the courage to kind of tell our citizens where we're headed for next year and on why we need to get there, and start that conversation relatively early. My only addition to the board would be For the Struggle, which is a partner organization based on Beatties Ford Road, grassroots organization doing tremendous work. I think they deserve special consideration for funding in this budget, based on the work they do in terms of working with our seniors in the community, and making sure that as that community change, and it is changing significantly every day, that those who historically have lived there want to call Beatties Road home, have the ability to stay there, but more importantly, to live in an environment in their homes that are relative to those of their neighbors in terms of upkeep, maintenance, and home repairs. I think they do a great job, and so I would love to see if there's a way for us to support them. Don't know if this is out of order. I did not submit Block Love Charlotte that does work with the homelessness in our community. They literally touch them every day. And if there's a way for us to consider funding for them, I would be supportive. I understand if it's out of order and we can't do it, I get it. But just in thinking about some of the things that we do at a very high level, that those two organizations, based on which For the Struggle does locally on the corridor, and what Block Love Charlotte do in reference to our homeless population. We got a homeless strategy with a home for all That's very high level. We should do that, but we also should be able to touch people every day on the street, and I think they can do a good job with that as well. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor, Mr. Manager, and Ryan and staff for a job well done. Thank you.
Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a quick question about the ARPA availability. How many years do we have to dispose of those funds before the availability lapses?
ARPA funds?
Yes.
Sorry. We have to have them obligated by the end of calendar year 2024, and then spent by the end of calendar year 2026.
All right, I would just recommend that we not hurry to find uses for those, because I think there will be plenty of them down the road. I would comment that I still have some questions about the firefighters and the issues that they have raised. I was concerned by some of what we were told related to the recruitment. I think in the environment we're in, and given the tough choices we had to make, trying to recouple in this budget is probably too much to ask. I don't think we would like the changes we would have to make elsewhere in order to achieve that. But some issues came to my attention that I would hope we could take another look at, like the fact that the SPO for, I think it is, patrol officers can get paid as much as a captain in the fire department. There are some comparisons there that just don't seem right. So again, without recommending that we try to recouple, I would like to look at that a little further. Otherwise, in general, I don't have line items, mainly because I have concerns similar to Mr. Graham's and some of the others that have been expressed of a big picture nature. And I don't think we should get lost in, $50,000 here or there. If you look on page 324, for example, you'll see that we have $115 million of 2024 bonds allocated to transportation. That translates to about $8 million per district per year. Do you have any idea how little $8 million buys? $8 million buys a mile or two of sidewalk, a very small amount of road. We have core basic responsibilities to the entire population of Charlotte, and we can't let our commitment to the disadvantaged population eclipse an awareness of the larger picture. So my concern is that as I look at our budget and our priorities and all of these programs, for the people who are not disadvantaged, there has to come a time when you kind of wonder, well, what's being done for me? I can't get rid of the panhandlers. I've got litter. I've got this. What are you doing for me? They don't need from us anywhere near as much as this disadvantaged population. And I'm not speaking against our support in that area. I recognize the urgency and the need. I understand where we are today in the country. But I think that this budget kicks a can down the road. And it really worries me, because what we're setting ourselves up for here is, as Mr. Graham alluded, a whole lot of pain very soon. We are not going to be able, even next year, to avoid some big revenue questions or expense questions. So we're not going to be able to continue our commitment to our social priorities and avoid a tax increase. And I think one of my difficulties this year is the appearance is being created that that's possible, that you can have your cake and eat it too, that you can keep doing the $50 million in here for housing, the other commitments we're making. You can keep doing that stuff and that it doesn't cost anything. There's going to be some pain involved in that. And what bothers me about that is when you look down and we get to the point where it's clear, and the manager has said this, Mr. Graham did, we're going to need more revenue. So where does that revenue come from? It comes from a property tax, principally. That's the discretionary tool that we have. We know that the property tax is painful at the lower income levels. So now we're going to have to resort to a revenue tool that inflicts pain on the same people that we're trying to assist with the investments we make in our social priorities. I think maybe there's an implicit assumption that the sales tax will help us to get out of the hole we're in on infrastructure. Well, the sales tax is not free, okay? And again, if you look at the way households spend, lower income households spend a higher percentage of their income on items subject to a sales tax than higher income households. So once again, you put the sales tax out there, the percentage impact on the net available income of households is impacted. So I think we need to take a more global view, and I realize in this conversation, it's not going to be a line item change, but I really feel that we have got to urgently, and I think Mr. Graham said this as well, we have got to start thinking urgently how we are going to resolve some of these conflicts. Because if we can't raise more money without hurting low-income people, and we're using the proceeds to help low-income people, I think we're chasing our own tail. I would mention in this context, too, that in the context of our mobility plan, we have a couple of documents that were created, and they show a list of all the projects that have been identified. And it's encyclopedic. It's a very useful piece of work, a reference. But just think about how much money it takes to do any of that. And where's it coming from? So I'm hoping that as we move forward, and again, I don't want to sound hostile to our social priorities or anything. I'm an economist, I'm a numbers guy, and I see a situation taking shape that's going to be difficult for all of us. I do, however, certainly want to commend the manager. This isn't a criticism of the work that was done to create this budget, because this budget is responsive to council priorities, certainly the large majority of council. You've done your job, and you've done it well. The staff has done it well. You made it work. You managed to make it work without a tax increase, so that's great. But we all have to join in a recognition that we're going to have to answer some difficult questions starting in the coming fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bakari?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a couple items for the board here. Number one, fire, achieve parity option with CMPD pay that was described by the budget director. 2, hourly workers provide pay increase floor option that was also proposed by the budget director today. CMPD, the ability to bank comp time in a non-expiring bank. I need to know the budget implication to that, but I'd like to put it on the board. Also, CMPD incentives for employees on call. I think you know, Ryan, what the details are behind that one, same as the last one. And then CMPD, the last one there, keep the CMPD helicopter in the CLT airport hangar. I know this is a longer term budget item, but I want to go ahead and list that in there. And then finally, tax relief. I'd like to propose removing the new property tax relief program that was posed in here. It's based on the flawed aging in place model that we had before. I think there are opportunities for us to look at this in a positive way for those being, affected by the property tax, yet they are gaining value in their property. There are other financial tools in the market to help with that. And I think most importantly, there are other things that are going to be coming up outside of the scope of this budget in the next year that are going to be impactful, and they're going to require our help, particularly Title 42 and what's coming from that perspective. I had emailed those items already to Marie. They're up there now. So that, colleagues, in under a minute and a half is how it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Nicely done, Mr. Bakari. Greatly appreciate it. I would like to just contextually, if we look at page 487 and think about coming out of COVID, based on our population growth from 2020 to 2022, we grew roughly 39,000 residents in the city of Charlotte. And during that same time, our unemployment rate decreased from 4.3 to 3.8, so dropping 50 basis points, while maintaining, not raising taxes for the 5th year in this proposed budget, and maintaining our AAA bond rating. Mr. Manager, I know we have lots of discussions about you, your role, performance, compensation, but I just want to commend you and the entire team for that large macro view of how our city has not only maintained through a tumultuous time, but actually has grown and strengthened throughout that time. So, Mr. Bergman, thank you for this budget. It does reflect our priorities. You didn't have to outline them on page 8 because it is reflected in the allocation. You know, I was reviewing this earlier this morning, and Mr. Bergman actually hit upon what I was thinking about, which is a potential solution to address our lowest paid hourly employees. And based on your proposal, Mr. Bergman, of what you just walked us through a few minutes ago, if we take the information on page 5 that says the two-bedroom for affordability is $46,200. That's what an employee would have to earn. And based on what you're proposing, Mr. Bergman, to touch all of our full-time hourly employees who make $60,000 or less, right? And I'm getting this information from page 17. That's 1,784 employees out of that full base of 2,821. We would be touching in a positive way 63% of our regular full-time employees if we were to move forward with Mr. Bergman's proposal, which I will fully support and advocate for, because I think that's tremendous. Also, realizing that we're not very far off. So on that same page, if you're looking at every full-time employee for the city of Charlotte, regular full-time employee, makes over $40,000. We do have a gap, but we're not very far off, and I think that's why this creative solution could address that. I just want to call out a couple of points that I think are important in the budget. Mr. Manager, I think this rapid response model that you are recommending, and Mr. Graham spoke to it, I know from north, south, east, west, within District 1, there are citizens are feeling the pains relative to code enforcement, high construction activity, which impact parking and walkability. And so I think this team will do very good work for us. I also want to call out the efforts in addressing the digital divide, specifically in phases 2 and 3, and particularly in 3 that focuses on developing technical job skills while being able to earn technical tools. As we know and we understand that jobs are pivoting, and you have to have a digital lens, a digital skill within your skill set to be able to earn dollars in the future. And so I'm glad that we're investing in that program, and will continue to invest in that program. Thank you, Mr. Bergman, for the clarity on question 18 and 19 that I had, because that was those were my only real clarifying questions. I also am happy to see that we are investing in Race Matters for Juvenile Justice. It's a fantastic program. The curriculum is great, and I'm glad that we are using that and leveraging that from a City of Charlotte employee perspective, and the continued support for Tree Charlotte, because every zoning discussion we go through, we talk about all this growth that's going on and it's impacting our tree canopy. And Tree Charlotte, just want to give a shout out to them. They do great work in maintaining and sustaining our tree canopy. The investment in the 5 fire departments, I think is fantastic. We need that level of infrastructure. I do also believe that we've not done the best job of getting out in front of preparing for this growth relative to our infrastructure needs. And so that means that our rate in which we need to catch up will have to be increased. And so things like investing in fire, and I had the pleasure of spending time with our water director and going out to the new Stowe site for Charlotte Water, And that is a significant investment in a way that's going to help not only Charlotte, but will have a regional impact as well. So we have to continue to do projects like that, probably at an increased rate in order for us to be able to sustain the growth that I highlighted as we first began to speak. The vacancies that you continue to highlight, Mr. Jones, in particular in CMPD, not only from a separation perspective, but from a retirement perspective, I think is something that I believe it's sitting at 12.7%. I think that's going to continue to be in front of us this budget year as we navigate through that, and we have to continue to think of creative ways, like we're addressing from a financial perspective, to address CMPD salary and create stickiness, but also attracting talent so we can fill that gap that exists there. The only, that's really all of the comments that I really had. The only one observation that I had, and it's not a huge budget line item, but just on page 445, I was just reviewing the non-regulatory fees that we incur from a city perspective, and just noticing, I know that our airport is the 5th busiest airport in the world, I believe, and a huge economic generator for the region and the state. But the airport fees are going up, the landing fees, car rental fees, bag fees are going up at double-digit percentage increases. And typically when those go up, they don't go back down. That typically creates a new floor. So I just would like for us to just be mindful of fees and how that impacts keeping the vibrancy of the airport and not pricing it out so commuters and Charlotte residents can come in and out of Charlotte and enjoy our city from a Thursday to Sunday tourism perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That has been a very valued experience. I wanted to just check in with the staff. Is there anything that's on this board that gave you, that you need additional clarification?
I don't think so. I think if we do, we'll reach out, but I was comfortable with the way we wrote everything. I think that would be more for the people who suggested them to make sure we're capturing it okay.
So I thought that we could start where we had to see if there are any other questions or comments. I had Ms. Watlington, followed by Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to lift up, I'm hearing around the room, and I agree with much of what I'm hearing in regards to we've got to start thinking immediately about next year and what that means. I would just offer a couple of things as we think about our social programs and the investment we have to make. I don't think it's an either or. When you talk about the magnitude of dollars that we need for investment, it's not a question of do we invest in corridors of opportunity or do we build roads. They're on two totally different planes. I'm happy, though, that we've got our Comp 2040 plan because it is our North Star and it requires that we aspire to be a city that not only invests in our mobility and our infrastructure, but also all of our people. So I think that as we begin to craft the path forward, it's not a question of robbing from Peter to pay Paul, but it's a question of how do we really grow and grow well. So I'll be looking forward to those continued conversations throughout the year. I know, like Councilmember Driggs mentioned, that we've got a ton of projects when it comes to what kind of work we need to do there. But I think we're up for the challenge, and I think that I hear good alignment around the room that that's what we really need to be talking about. And every month, every decision we're making, when we talk about rezoning, when we're talking about business incentives, all of those have to tie into whatever the building blocks are going to be for our budget, not just for next year, but for going forward. So I look forward to doing that work, and I think it's great to be at a place where we all are in a position to be aligned to go forward and do that work. So I think it's a great time to do that work. I think we've got the right folks on board to do that work and to lead it. So I look forward to it.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
I guess I have a question for Mr. Jones or Mr. Bergman, whoever wants to take it. Again, I think context is important. And while we can't tell the future, we have heard, I think, we should consider that the county is going to be raising taxes, property taxes. I would believe that's what's coming next week in the manager's proposal. Can you give some context about how that affects, how a county tax increase will affect the city tax bill?
I'll start off, then I'll hand it off to Ryan. I think even when you're not even thinking about a tax increase, but think about the residents' tax bill, roughly a third is the city, and roughly 2/3 is the county. So, Ryan, we have for the, I guess the best way to look at it is the median valued home. Even revenue neutral would be a certain increase on someone's bill, and then for the county, it would be about what? How would you characterize?
Yeah, so according to the data that the county put out the other day, which included our proposed budget, they had the median bill at revenue neutral going up about $445 annually. Every cent that they would add on top of that works the same way as ours, where if it's a $400,000 house, it would add $40. But maybe to your question, there is a smaller impact as well, where our sales tax is determined based on the total tax levy. And if they raise taxes a penny and we don't, we would lose the following year, not this upcoming year, about $600,000. But the way that the revaluation worked this time, it looked like we were going to pick up some on that at revenue neutral. So we'll try to get you some more context around that. And by the next time we talk, we'll have the county's presentation as well, so we can give you real numbers and what it means.
Yeah, I think that context is going to be really important. Again, I think in how we analyze and how we're being honest with our constituents about what is in this budget and how this is being approached. I fail to see how this is really in line with the priorities and the goals that we've been setting over the past years that I've been on council, at least. So if we are just going to kind of take a step back this year and kind of shake the stars out of our eyes and come back next year, let's say that. But I just, with the context of everything that's happening, we got to, if we want to stay on the path this upcoming fiscal year, we have to kind of take a look back at this and, I won't say start over, but adjust. That's just my feedback.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All right, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate you coming back around. So since we definitely know if we have any recommendations to the budget, we need to do it now, so if we can go back up to 21, where I was, or wherever, 21, and just pop in there. I will ask for my colleagues to consider a organization that has been around since 1993 with a real focus specifically for, honestly, African-American young men regarding mentoring, agriculture, and social justice, and that is the Males Place. So I would like to add the Males Place to this because we can track their work and the teachings and the young men that have gone on to graduate and through scholarships, as well as, for me, the biggest piece, the agricultural and the social justice piece that they have instilled and the impact on community for generations. That is helpful, but that is also in line with my initial question with this update. Do we have, who's in that 3-year with being respectful of limited funds that we have, but I do want to add that into our discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to ask the allotment for crisis. assistance ministries, I wanted to know how that compared to what they asked for. And the reason I ask, you all know I have a nonprofit organization. I work on the front line, working with vulnerable populations and homeless individuals. And I've never reached out to Crisis, and they weren't there. Crisis has been in the community prior to COVID. That's the one organization that you can call with unrestricted requests. They have furniture, utilities, sometimes rental, deposits. So they have been there since the beginning, and I think they'll be the organization that, when organizations who have restricted funding, they refer you to Crisis. So I want to make sure that we are supporting Crisis because they meet a need in the community for so many. And I wanted to know how the allotment compared to what they asked for.
So thank you. Again, it's Marie Harris, and they actually asked for $550,000 for this year. They were allotted in the current year's budget, for the upcoming year's budget, that's how much they asked for, $550. In the current year budget, they have $425 that we fund them for as a $425,000 as a financial partner. And we, as we mentioned, all the partners received the same level of funding. Besides, we added Race Matters for Juvenile Justice as a financial partner. But everyone else, besides the dedicated resources that are based on taxes and numbers like that, everyone else as the general fund discretionary partners received the same in the proposed budget.
I'm sorry. I was.
Okay, yes, so.
Compared to what they asked for.
They asked for $550, and we gave them $425.
Okay, so I would like to propose an additional $125,000 for Crisis Ministries. Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Driggs?
Could we please revisit the question of when we're meeting next time? I don't see us needing 3 hours to follow on. I mean, do we still have the action to meet at 1:30?
No, we don't have that action now. It did not happen.
Can I make a
Pass,
motion?
right?
To meet an hour and a half before the meeting that same Monday?
Or you would like, instead of on the 25th?
No.
I'm sorry, help me remember what meeting we're talking about. We have a meeting on the 25th, right? And we have a council meeting on the 22nd. I'm just trying to figure out, okay. So we were supposed to have this final meeting for preparation on the 25th of May. And that would be where 6 votes would be necessary to carry anything forward after the staff gets you additional information. What I think, we are not having a meeting on the 22nd except for a regular council day. Correct. So I'm trying, I'll wait. What do you, what
I'm gonna make a motion, but I just want to see like how many of my colleagues, just a finger up or something, still have the desire they had earlier in the meeting to not close the door right now. I'm glad to make the motion, but are you guys comfortable where we are, or do you want to do that still? You want to still have an opportunity?
I think we should, for a $3.3 billion budget, we should still have the opportunity to yes.
I mean, does everybody, what?
Didn't you guys vote on that?
Well, we voted no, but I think the sentiment was, let's get through today's meeting. I'm good, I've got my items. I was just trying to be helpful, but maybe that shouldn't have
I
been
didn't
me.
hear anything that would cause us
I
to
didn't
change
either,
the
so
vote
I'm not
we
gonna,
already had.
I'll not make a motion. If somebody else wants to, they can.
I'll make
but-
the motion. I'd like to make a motion that we meet at 3:30 on the 22nd, which is an hour and a half before the next council meeting.
To do what?
To go over straw votes for any other items that might come up between now, after we receive the information. So it's
So
a
you'd have
safety
to-
net.
It's a 2-step process to ask the question and get some information and then to vote on it. So you'd have to have one date for the asking of the question and another date for.
No, I think just to clarify, I think you're saying we're gonna get feedback from the questions that you've just gotten and maybe a couple other things. The question is there one more session for like an hour and a half where people can add to the straw vote items, or are they closed when we're done here? That's the
Yes.
2 options. That's it, yeah.
So you have a motion for that? Is there a second? Second. We have a second. Any further discussion on it? It would be on the 22nd, I believe. Did you say that for that
Yes.
Monday before the council meeting?
Yes.
An hour and a half?
I'm good.
In advance of the council meeting. Okay. Usually when we start our council meetings, we have about 4 people on the time that the council meeting starts. So we have to figure out an hour and a half, and maybe we can do it in a different room, and then we can come in and go to the council, go right into the council meeting. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands.
Go for it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
5.
5.
Malcolm had 5.
All right, next 5.
Well,
All
I just,
right? So it would be the 22nd. And so I don't know if that was like a half vote or half hand. So right now, we have a meeting on the 25th that actually does have.
Everybody has spoken. An hour and a half.
Well, I'll wait till everybody gets their decision together. Maybe we just need a little bit more time to caucus over it. So we will just wait for everybody to caucus and decide what they want to do.
Mayor, are we still doing that?
You gotta ask for the no votes.
I know. I know that. I'm just trying to figure out who the yes votes were. I don't think that I got that right. So I'm going to wait. So all in favor, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And Malcolm had his.
Okay,
Malcolm.
Malcolm, are you up or down?
I can be up.
Okay, so at 6, we will have a meeting on the 22nd.
Please record me as a yes as well, Mayor. I'd like to support all the colleagues, now that there's 6 votes.
Okay, so now that would be at 3:30 on Monday, the 22nd.
Move to close.
All right. Do we have anything else to cover? No. Mr. Bergman, I'm sorry, Ms. Harris? I couldn't hear you, Ms. Harris.
Talking about these 5.
All right, does everybody agree what's on that they've put on the slide in the blocks? Is everybody comfortable with
But do
where
you
they
need
are?
votes? Do you need 5 votes?
Yes, ma'am.
No, do we need 5 today, or is that what's done in Strawville?
That's
We
what
need to have 5.
the next meeting is about. To have 2 versions, 2 times at this.
Oh, man.
But wouldn't it be great if we could go ahead and investigate
Yeah.
these things in the meantime, too?
Yes.
Like, we wouldn't want to wait until 2 days before
Yes.
to look at all of
The
them.
staff has to bring back the
I
questions.
think
We got
that-
more questions on
I
the
think that-
recommendations.
What we've done in the past, and I'm sorry that we're not here, but basically, what we ask is there 5 people to support these. And then that way, we know that we have a foundation that will lead to the straw poll votes later. So
Yeah.
we do need to go through this, and
With the nuance being, it's not like I'm 100% in, it's like I'm supportive enough for staff to go research it.
We're moving it forward. I moved that we move all of the items on this list
Second.
forward.
Second, with that.
That's well done.
Mr. Driggs,
done.
well, you know, sometimes, guys, I know it seems like a lot of process, but it's one that it's important, because these people have given this a lot of thought, and I just really think that if everything is on there that you agree would get some feedback from the staff, we'll have a longer meeting the next time.
Perfect.
So, all right? Do I have a motion? I heard Mr. Driggs move.
Second.
Move all 36 items. We had a second from Mr. Bakari. Any discussion?
Yes, I do. Can you pull all the changes in one? Where we have one item that was removal of the relief program? I can, I mean, I'm trying to see all the requests, and there was one request that was removal of the relief program, is that right?
No, it was to fund the.
Removal of the
No, it
homes
was- that's
grant
right.
program? Homes
Councilmember
grant?
Bakari suggested it.
Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna support that.
So pull it for a separate vote.
Okay, I make a substitute motion to have everything except that last item, where removal of the homes program that supports the very individuals we are trying to protect. So I wouldn't support that. But I would like to get more information on the remainder of this.
Second, the substitute motion.
You have a second to the substitute motion. You're voting for items 1 through 35.
Can we remove one of Ajmer's? You guys can pick. Fine, that's good. Go ahead.
All right, all in favor, say aye. And anybody opposed? Anyone opposed? All right, so now we have to vote on, do we have a motion on 36?
Move to approve 36.
Second,
second
sure.
and a
Sounds like it's going to have a lot of support.
No, we voted on a substitute motion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. All right.
Remember, Title
We have a
42.
motion and a second on 36 now, tax relief. All right, any discussion on that? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of that motion, please raise your.
Oh, she's with me. Oh, yeah. Made the record show.
Mr. Driggs
Driggs.
moved and Mr. Bakari
Seconded.
second. You all right, we good? All right, so, Mr. Bergman?
So just so I can manage expectations here, is the expectation that by like next Friday or Saturday, we give you all of this? Or is the expectation that we answer all the questions, have that Monday meeting, and then give you all this and whatever was added Monday on like Tuesday or Wednesday before straw votes?
Yeah.
Ladder.
Let me see, the way that I recall how
not what
we've
we
done
just
this,
voted.
is that we have
Just
said
approved all that.
earlier that you answer the questions and get them out as soon as you can.
Yep.
That you would also provide, you would get any new information for new recommendations by the 22nd. And then we would vote on that on the 25th.
Got it.
Okay, everybody feel, that's what we said. All right? So am I still on tax relief? So I believe that we have a motion and we had a second, all in favor of the motion, and we had two
Let's
people.
go, team.
All right, all against the motion, all
so
in
close.
opposition into the motion to not
Oh, it's
include,
2 to
not
2.
to carry 36 forward. You need.
just said all in opposition?
No, all in support.
It's a double negative, so just vote.
I already said
both times.
support, and Ed and Tarek voted yes.
Everybody else just raise your hand.
Everybody else just raise your hand, that's right. All
Partisan lines.
right, that doesn't pass. Okay, so we will not be talking about tax relief because it didn't get 5. All right, Mr. Bergman, anything else? Mr. Jones, anything else? Nobody else gets to talk, we adjourn.